So, goodness, I talk a lot, don't I? So we have another 17 minutes for me to take your questions. And I do see a few questions here, and let me go ahead and answer them. Chuck wants to know, I am curious about canvas. What's the best material to use or combination of materials? Okay, Chuck, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you're talking about doing resin art on canvas. Okay, so right away, the best suggestions I can give you about doing resin art on canvas is that you need to support the canvas in the center, because the weight of the resin is going to make your canvas pool, or it's going to make it dip in the center, so your resin is going to pool. So somehow you're going to have to support the center of your canvas, you know, stack of magazines, some pizza boxes, something like that, to help give it some support. Then, as for resin, you know, it kind of comes down to a personal preference. I would tell you it needs to be a dome ring resin, just because you want to have that surface tension, so that way the resin will want to stay on top of the canvas. And then beyond that, you know, it's kind of, you know, what you want to use. You know, I guess, you know, it's kind of like, why do some people drive Ford trucks and some people drive Chevy trucks? That being said, we do have a couple of resins here at Resin Obsession. We have the Total Cast resin and the Master Cast resin from Eli Chem Resins in the UK that are designed to go over artwork. If you're going to coat your artwork with resin, I would suggest the Total Cast. It's a beautiful crystal clear formula. It's doming. It has a quicker cure time. If you're going to add colors to your resin and then do your resin art that way, I would suggest the Master Cast. It has a longer pot time. I think it takes color a little better, and it gives you a little more time to work the resin. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, we just got our Eli Chem shipment in today, so we have more of both of those resins in addition to the Resi Blast, so that's pretty cool. So, next question. Judy wants to know, after giving part A, meaning part A resin, a little warm water bath and popping what I see before I pour, I use a heat gun to help with any remaining bubbles. But I'm using nail polish, which is highly flammable. What to do? The blowing through a straw trick hasn't worked. Okay. I have not used nail polish within resin to color it. I have done a little bit where using the nail polish on top, either once it's cured or it's a little sticky or something like that. So I do have to wonder if maybe the nail polish is causing some kind of a reaction that's causing the bubbles. Judy, I don't know what you're casting into, but I would also suggest maybe your heat gun or something warming up the mold. Sometimes having, even though the resin is warm, if your casting surface is cold, either your mold or your bezel or whatever you got going on is a little cold, sometimes that surface tension will cause bubbles to occur as well. So just take your heat gun and go over, you know, your surface. I will tell you, if you're using one of our plastic molds, be careful. You can melt a mold. I've done that. So just go over it and kind of help break the surface tension, and we'll see if that does it make a difference. So, okay. Oh, so Chuck has another question about resin art. I've had issues with using cotton canvas and was thinking about wood. You know, as best I can, you know, full disclosure here, I have done minimal resin art stuff, and especially, you know, the surfaces, you know, the substrates are not my specialty. I do know that, you know, the wood is nice. You know, a lot of the resin artists I talk to prefer the wood because you don't have to worry about the pooling issue, and they think that it's easier for it to stay level. You do have to prep your wood surface to make sure that the resin does not, you know, soak into the wood. So just kind of what I understand from them, some kind of generic primer is what you need to get that going. So anyway, okay, so I am going to also go over a few of our questions that I've had emailed to me this evening. So while you guys are coming up with more questions, I'm just going to answer these as well. So, are there materials that the resin will destroy or damage upon contact? So I have not run into anything where you've put the resin on it and it's like, you know, like a mad scientist experiment and it bubbles up and disintegrates and anything like that. I've not had that happen. Depending on what you're working with, however, resin will soak into your item. So if it's anything like paper, you know, foods, you know, candies, that kind of thing, basically anything, what I tell people is if it can get wet or if it changes appearance when it gets wet, then the resin is going to do the same thing to it. And so when in doubt, you need to seal it. And what I like to seal items with is either a layer of a clear drying glue, or we do have a resin gloss sealer spray. Bear with me a minute. There we go. This is the resin gloss sealer spray we sell. It's an aerosol product. Unfortunately, it's only available to those of you in the continental United States. But this is great for sealing weird items like flowers, basically something that you wouldn't dare try and paint the glue on because it would just be too tedious. And, you know, a few light coats of this will work really well. This is also great for getting a shiny, glossy finish to your resin castings too. I like it for that. But basically, I haven't had anything like that. Now, I will tell you, I have a blog post about this as well, in that lots of people I'll see use stuff in resin that it looks great for the first, I don't know, month or two, maybe even 3 or 4 months. But I've learned from my own experience when I used candies in resin, they looked great. And actually, it was a Valentine's Day candy heart conversation pendants, and they looked great. And so, you know, I sold a few. I'm like, oh, I'm going to put them away and we'll bring them out next year. So bring them out, you know, 10, 11 months later. And yeah, they'd started to brown. They looked awful. So my general rule is when in doubt, seal it. So if it's something hard, you know, plastic, metal, something non-porous, I won't seal it. But when in doubt, you need to seal it. So either a clear drying glue or some of the gloss sealer spray. And Ellen, I totally wish we could send this to you in Canada. Out of my hands. I wish we could. Totally. Okay. So, next question. If you pour resin in layers, letting it dry in between layers, will it adhere to itself or will it break apart later? Great question. If you are pouring like to like, it should do fine. So for example, epoxy to epoxy, polyester to polyester. What I know about resins, theoretically, you could probably put a layer of epoxy and then a layer of polyester. I don't know why you would want to do that, but theoretically it should be fine. Silicone, obviously, you know, it's not going to stick to it unless you pour more silicone onto it. That will stick to itself pretty easily. And then polyurethane should as well. I have to warn you though, polyurethanes are kind of crabby resins. They really don't like anything but themselves, and the colorants are designed for them. So polyurethane should be fine, but I would not expect an epoxy to do well in a layer over polyurethane. Okay, next question. Someone is asking how much of the glow pigment I would add to resin. So I don't know specifically which glow pigment this person is referring to. However, if you're referring to the ones we sell in Resin Obsession, generally 1 part glow pigment to 4 parts mixed resin in general is what I do. And if it's a thicker casting, you can probably get away with less. If it's a thin casting, you're going to need that 1-to-4 ratio. But that's generally where I like to start with. And so I like to make sure my 2 parts are mixed first, and then I'll work in the glow powder. Okay. Next question. Every resin I use has tons of bubbles and it's not pretty at all. I also get it everywhere and make a total disaster. How can I achieve the look of the beautiful resin jewelry you make, or am I just not cut out for this? All right. First of all, I will tell you, I have been there. And I know I sit here and I talk to you guys about resin. I do these tutorials, and I realize that there are some of you, you know, sitting there going, oh, sure, right. No, I have totally been there, okay? And if you haven't been on the blog recently, get on the blog and see my post from last week, and you'll see how I broke 5 rules. I'm just like, I gotta get this done. I gotta get this resin casted. I'm going out of town. I gotta get this. Yeah. And so I did it, and the resin always wins. Okay. So the reason that's important is we have all been frustrated, and especially in the beginning when you're learning, I get it, because if, you know, you do your resin casting, like let's say you do it tonight, you got it all in the molds, and then you come back and maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's the next day. And if you're like me, you can't even remember what you had for lunch today. And so heck, if you can even remember how you cast the resin. And so you're looking at this and you have no idea what you did wrong. That's normal. I understand it's frustrating, but it's totally normal. Okay. So what I can tell you about bubbles is, depending on where you are this time of year, resin does not like cold weather. And the colder your resin is, the more likely it is to experience bubbles when you start mixing. Okay, so the first thing you can do is warm up your resin. And I'll see if I can include a link up here on cold weather resin casting. So the first thing you need to do is warm up your resin. And the way I like to do that, and the way that our resinista, Kate Leadham, showed how to do it, is you leave the resin in the plastic bags and you put it in a little crock pot that's got water in it, like one of those little potpourri crock pots, and you slowly warm up the resin. You don't want your resin super hot when you do this, because then you'll reduce the pot time. But you want the bottles warm, like you hold them up to your cheek and they feel nice and warm. And so that's the first thing you could do. The second thing I like to do is what I mentioned a little bit earlier here, is you take your heat gun, warm up your molds. So you're going to warm up your silicone molds. You just kind of blow the hot air over it. You're going to warm up your plastic molds. So that way it's like your resin isn't shocked when it hits the surface. The third thing you can do that Kate shows in the blog post is basically she makes a little resin hot box. So Kate lives in Canada and has to literally bake her resin probably all but about 3 weeks out of the year. And so what she did is she shows how she creates shelves, and she's got a heating blanket in there and creates just a little resin hot box and keeps it nice and warm in there, and it allows her resin to cure, and it really cuts down on the amount of bubbles that she's got. The other best advice I can give you on keeping your bubbles out of the resin is to be incredibly careful mixing the resin. You're not scrambling an egg, okay? You're very deliberate. I mean, you need to mix, but you're not scrambling an egg. You're not whisking. You're not just going as fast as you possibly can. You want to be deliberate, but you don't want to make the motion where you're like bringing your stir sticks up off the bottom of the cup, because that's what is kind of whipping it and introducing air. It might be too that you might need to consider using a different kind of resin. I mean, one of the things I love about the Resin Obsession Super Clear Resin is it's designed for molds. It mixes in a really thin viscosity, so bubbles are almost never a problem. But it's, I mean, like, we've talked, it's not the one size fits all resin, so it just kind of depends on what you want to do. But anyway, those are the best tips I can give you on how to keep the bubbles out of your resin. Next question. So somebody is getting ready to dive into their first resin casting. Welcome. And they wanted to know about release agents. Can I use Vaseline or any other household ingredient for this, or on the mold before I pour? So the answer is yes, but it's not ideal, and here's why. Vaseline will work as a release agent. The problem with Vaseline is that if you're not really careful about getting it smooth inside your cup, you're going to leave like swirls and ridges and fingerprint marks, and those will impart onto your resin casting. So for that reason, that's why I don't like to use Vaseline. I like to use one of the mold releases we sell, because it goes on in a fine mist, coats the surface evenly, and it's usually not a problem. Sometimes though, if I know I've got a mold that's really difficult to release, or I know it's going to be a problem to get the casting out, Vaseline can be good. But quite frankly, I like our Petrolise mold release so much that I don't have to use Vaseline anymore. For those of you who are interested, you can find it in our store, but unfortunately it's an aerosol, which means it can only go to the continental United States. So, okay, so another question, and these are both kind of the same, they're similar, so I'll go ahead and cover them both. Somebody wants to know how large a volume of resin can be effectively mixed at one time. So I would tell you the first thing you need to know is, what does the manufacturer recommend? Every manufacturer is gonna have a minimum mixing amount, because you need a certain amount of the resin and hardener to get the two parts to cause enough of a chemical reaction and heat to get it to cure. But there's also the other end, which is the maximum mixing amount. And the reason that's important is because if you mix too much together, basically your resin is going to heat up and cure like within seconds, and so you're not going to be able to work it. So I would tell you to start with whatever the the resin manufacturer recommends for your minimum mixing, and then start there. And assuming you have the right tools, the right measuring cups, the right stir utensils, appropriate for the size of resin you're mixing, and you've done it before, you feel good and you're doing a good job of getting stuff mixed and all that, then I would say, go with whatever, you feel comfortable with. Some of the resins we sell for art purposes, you can mix a gallon at a time. The manufacturer says that's fine. I wouldn't recommend that for a beginner, but if you've got one of those big wooden paint sticks and you've got a big enough cup and you've done this before and you understand the purpose or the importance of scraping your cup and doing all kinds of good stuff, then I'd say you're good. So then somebody wanted to know, to take that one step further, they wanted to know whether or not they could take a gallon of their part A and part B, mix them together, pour it on a tabletop, and get it on there in 12 minutes. Because that's what the manufacturers told them is the good work time. And I would say, if you're good at what you can do and you're confident and you've done resin before, then yes, you should be able to get that done. If you're a beginner, don't go there. Start with a small project, get good at mixing, pour it on your surface, make sure you got the bubbles out and all that. So it kind of comes down to some skill levels. That's, like we talked earlier in the broadcast, start small, gain some skills, build up. Okay. Well, I'm looking at the clock and it is 9 o'clock, and I'm so glad all of you joined me this evening to talk beginner resin jewelry making stuff. So as my treat to you for joining me this evening, I would like to give you the opportunity to get my book, Resin Jewelry Making, for 90% off its regular price. So I'm going to give you the direct link. Let me make sure I give it to you. It's right here. I'm going to make sure that I give you the right link. So go to shop.resinobsession.com/collections/books. And it's right there at the far right of the top row. It's my book, Resin Jewelry Making. Normal price on it is $7.99. For those of you who are joining me this evening, you have until 11:59 p.m. tomorrow evening. So 11:59 p.m. February 2nd, 2017 to get the book at 80% off. So that makes it 80 cents, I think. And all you need to do is use code Valentine at checkout. Okay, Valentine, all caps. I don't think it's case sensitive, but I'll just tell you all caps to be safe. And that way you can get a copy of the book. What will happen is you'll place your order for the book. You'll get an email hopefully within the hour of placing your order telling you how to download. If you buy the book and you don't see the email, please check your junk folder, your spam folder. Sometimes those emails get sorted there, and it should give you instructions. If it's been 6, 8, 10 hours or something, you haven't seen anything, by all means drop us an email and we'll help you get your copy. But I would love for all you beginners to get ready to go on resin, because it's a total ton of fun. And I'm glad to see everyone here this evening. So I know I didn't get to some of your questions this evening. I wish we had more time. I can't believe how quickly this goes. It's good to see everyone. So I do see a comment here from Brandy that she's had so many fails lately, so much that she was giving up. And Brandy, I've been there, and it happens. And all I can tell you is enjoy the journey and enjoy how much you're learning. I will tell you there's without a doubt, I would not know what I know about resin today if I hadn't made so many mistakes. And even the mistakes I made and that I posted in last week's blog post, what helps me with that is you learn the limits of the resin. You learn how you can push the resin or not push the resin in this case maybe. And that's how you get really good at resin. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. And even to this day, I still keep them all in a box. I don't know why, but I do. And it's how it comes. But enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. And it's okay to just be like, you know what? I got to walk away from this for today, maybe the weekend, maybe in a week. Just walk away and come back. Just don't enjoy the journey. That's what I can tell you. So Judy is asking again if I could run the link by everyone so that way you could get the book. So the direct or the link to the book category on Resin Obsession is shop.resinobsession.com/collections/books. And that'll take you to our books category. And the resin jewelry making book is the book at the first row, all the way over at the far right. Resin jewelry making, normal price is $7.99. You can use code Valentine to get the book for 90% off this evening, and so that brings it down to 80 cents. And I hope you enjoy it. I know I've enjoyed having everyone here this evening. Thanks all for coming, and I hope everyone enjoys their resin journey. And if you have more questions, or if I didn't get to your question this evening, by all means, please leave it in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to get to them when I can. And I'll try and add some links up here to some of the stuff I talked about when the time allows over the next day or two. And I should put stuff away, and I should find out what Fred's up to. I have no idea where he is. Maybe he's filling orders. Wouldn't that be cool? So anyway, bye everyone. Thanks for joining in this evening. And if you haven't already, be sure to fan us here on Facebook so that way you know when I'm doing the next live event. And if you're not already on our email list, I'll try and include a link up here too, so that way you can get a little email reminder in your inbox next time I do a live broadcast. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining. Good night.